I'm gonna get us started here.
All right.
Hello, I'm Art Francisco.
And I'm Andrew G.
And this is the Marxist line, week 73.
Yep.
We got a pretty good show lined up. We're gonna be talking about Luna Oi and her new video on nationalism on YouTube.
And then we also got a bunch of stuff in Theory and State of Movement from Michael Roberts, and mostly centered on
the economy.
Marx and economics this week.
Yeah, we're gonna economic crunch time. It seems like it's kind of on a lot of people's minds. Everybody's kind of trying to talk about it. What's that?
It should be. Definitely should be. I mean, yeah, and I like, yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into my thoughts on Roberts in a little bit here, but let's turn it over to Luna Oi, and we're gonna watch a couple clips of this. You want to give a little introduction there, Art?
Yeah. So Luna Oi is there's kind of an unflattering section of her, but she's basically she is a YouTuber who's pretty well known, kind of in the left and in the Marxist community by now.
Yeah, we've covered her a bunch of times on the show.
Yeah, she's got like thousands of subscribers, and her videos get a lot more attention than ours. But she's also been around for a while too.
Most of hers are like, they're kind of have a pattern and scripted. Sometimes they do like talk shows and stuff, but yeah, they have specific themes each week.
Yeah, and she's been doing this a while with her partner, what's his name? American Johnson, I think.
Yeah.
And so who also lives in Vietnam. And her videos have basically become popular because she's talking about Vietnam and nobody else really talks about Vietnam.
And I've liked some of her videos before, and some of them are, we always have our points, but this one was a little off for me.
Oh.
And, what you got a clip, or are you gonna comment on?
Yeah, so I don't really have any clips like like noted out. I was thinking like her video is kind of long. It's like 26 minutes. And so like I'm not sure if we can really react to like the whole video for the show. Yeah. Unless we want to do it like next week or something.
Sure. Well, it's up to you. If you think there are some important points to be made,
sure.
We can hold off on it, but yeah,
Wait,
I'll leave that in your court.
Here's her video, like just summarized. I've only watched it once. I think you've only watched it once, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't mind going over it again and making a couple notes on like some of her arguments.
Yeah, and so like, so I'm just gonna kind of like try to paraphrase her video in my own words. For anybody that hasn't seen this yet, as I understand it, Luna Oi is responding to people in the left who are criticizing Vietnamese nationalism, and and she's basically suggesting that this is not the same as what she calls right-wing nationalism, uh, and uh, and so and that basically it's progressive. And so her case is that Vietnamese nationalism is progressive, and it's socialist, and it's essential uh, to a path towards socialism, and whatever that means. Like, and um, so like, uh, most of her argument is like centered on what I think is an argument based on appeal to authority, right? Where the authority is coming from Ho Chi Minh and Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture.
Yeah.
And I think there's a James Connolly quote. I can't remember if there's somebody else that I'm missing. I think there is. But the bottom line is that her argument it doesn't have a what I think is a serious analysis of Vietnamese nationalism as it is in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it appeared more of like a, illogical attack on, like, instead of saying what fully clearly what Vietnamese nationalism was, she's criticizing right-wing nationalism in other countries. So that
Yeah.
really didn't address me what that means for Vietnamese nationalism.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I feel like this is kind of a the issue I have is that this isn't like doesn't seem like a serious like study of what nationalism looks like in Vietnam in 2021. Like, you know.
I mean, and I think it's important. It is important to have these discussions because obviously, I mean, we see. I mean, you look at places like North Korea, and we've got our good old Marxist Leninist buddies that adore those places, and then
Sure.
so I mean, if you're gonna talk about Vietnam and like what's the difference between that kind of nationalism and Vietnamese nationalism, even, I mean,
Right.
I
Or
just think it was,
Chinese nationalism.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So, yeah.
but it's like,
Anyways,
but I mean, I would have liked, what I have liked to see is I would have liked to see Luna Oi show us like specific examples of like nationalist parades or the lack or anti parades, you know, and basically like are there rallies where there's flag waving or like for politicians, for example, like
yeah.
how does that all play out in Vietnam? I really like, obviously neither of us are from Vietnam, and so
No.
like someone who's Vietnamese would probably know about these things a lot better than we do. But as when we're talking about something like this, I think the first thing we should do is we should say like, well, hey, what is like concrete reality? Like, what are the facts on the ground, right? And before we can say whether it's progressive or not.
Yeah.
And
then maybe we can lead to broader discussions and questions about, well, can we have like, if it's not called nationalism, what can we call it? Can we have countries that are like, with like certain ethnic regions that are like united in can we have nations like that while still building towards like an internationalist workers movement? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like, um,
that's kind of what's
I mean,
rolling around in my mind.
I'm not saying that, like, I mean, I really think like any criticism or even a defense should start with understanding the facts of what's on the
Yeah.
ground, um, and a big part of my issue with Luna's video, and this is like I was like we were saying we should probably like react to this next week,
Yeah.
like do a more deeper dive into it. Is that like she references like Ho Chi Minh and his thoughts on nationalism in the colonial era of Vietnam, like when it was a French colony.
I
And
know, and I said I get that. I mean, that's obvious that there was, I mean, needed a nationalist struggle to force out French imperialism, but I mean that's colonial area then. Like, how does that transcend to today?
well, like the thing is like like national nationalism even then like I don't think it's like necessarily like all bourgeois nationalism. I mean, I think that there's
Yeah.
such a thing as like bourgeois nationalism, like of the capitalist class.
Yeah, obviously there's different. I mean, that was one
And
big thing in like in China and uniting China is like because there were so many
and
factions of
there's
kind of
gonna be some
nationalism.
level of national identification, and
Yeah,
I think Luna misses like the reason why, and the reason why is because the bourgeoisie divides the world into nation states.
yeah,
And so and it itself is divided by nation states because the bourgeoisie of like say the United States, you know, controls the United States, right? And it's like its little kingdom. The bourgeoisie in the UK or Germany controls those countries. And it's like, and it establishes those borders, you know, because it controls that state. That state works for them. And
yeah,
so, um, and so because of that, the proletariat is divided.
yeah,
And so there's gonna be some level of division there in in working within the nation state, but like just by nature. But I think like what uh what I found here was like when Luna Oi basically says that, like, I mean, she says that, like, for one, that like nationalism is like this kind of is like um like well, she doesn't like really paint it as like, it has to be this hardline far right kind of nationalism, and that's not always the case, right? Like
yeah,
because
yeah. I know. Yeah, I was like, well, what's differentiating that, and what can we still have that and have a internationalist movement stuff? So, yeah, I mean, 'cause there isn't obviously that just far right. Yeah,
when and the other thing is she doesn't really like there is like a couple like there's one person that talks about like nationalism who I think is worth putting into the injecting into the conversation here, and that's Lenin, because Lenin wasn't supporting nationalism. He was very critical of it. He was very critical of what he called the Great Russian chauvinism, and like when like like I mean, I'm sure we're agreed that he's like basically the architect of the Russian Revolution and the early Soviet Union.
yeah,
And like the Soviet Union was set up as a federation of different states, different nations, and every ethnic group was basically given the right of self-determination because he
Yeah.
staunchly believed in the self-determination of nations. Like Ukraine, for example, is a big one. And so, like, they were free to associate with the Soviet Union. They were free to break off if they wanted to.
At
And
least until Stalin came into.
well, yeah, because Stalin didn't believe in in the right of self-determination of nations.
Yeah.
And Stalin was a big proponent of this idea of like left-wing nationalism, because Stalin supported nationalism. Like he was very chauvinistic. So like so I mean, yeah, we could talk about more about this next week, but I mean, I think
I think, but there does needs to be some clarity, but I don't think Luna provided very much on the question of nationalism.
We've spoken about Luna before and how like it appears that she is providing the party line of the Vietnamese Communist Party.
Yeah.
And so I know that a lot of like younger people on the left, like, they eat this stuff up like hook, line, and sinker. But I think it's important to have like a healthy degree of skepticism on these questions.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's obviously difference between Chinese nationalism and as I said before, North Korean nationalism, because Vietnam is not like, I mean, there's some obvious differences. So if we're going to bring them up and we're going to be talking about these other nations, then we need a little more clarity and we need proper terms to discuss what's going on and how we can approach this and apply to it to, overall an internationalist workers movement. So anything else in closing? You want to go on to this IMT article? Or?
Yeah, let's move on to economy, huh?
Yeah.
Pretty much everything else we got going on is economic related.
Yeah.
So like,
let me pull up my notes here. Okay. Yeah, so this one's from IMT, right?
Yeah. International Marxist tendency. And so so as I understand it, I mean, the basically the entire Marxist community is dealing with Biden and the changes that he's going to bring, because it's such a stark contrast to Trump, and wrestling with the question of what exactly is changing, right?
Yeah.
Like and one of the biggest differences between Biden and Trump is the way Biden is going to handle the economy. And what is his economic policy and the economic policy of the Democrats. And I know that like John Ryman, for example, has like pointed out that several people that he's talked to said that basically Biden was going to be the same thing as Trump and he was going to extend neoliberalism. But more and more, that's like as Biden has announced his policy, that doesn't seem to be the case.
No, well, I mean, one of his big economic advisors is Stephanie Kelton, who's a big MMT proponent.
Yeah, and
I
Biden's
mean, that's
pushing
like a
out
revival of Keynesian.
Yeah, and Biden's pushing out basically the biggest infrastructure package since the New Deal.
Yeah.
Like $2.4 trillion.
Yeah.
And so things do seem to be changing a little. And so I would say the Marxist community as a whole is basically wrestling with what does this mean? Like, right? And like what does this mean for the economy? What does this mean for us as Marxists? How do we how do we respond to this? What does this mean for the working class? What does this mean for capitalism? Because like this is basically the U.S. is basically the empire of the world right now. So, you know,
And I mean that's the problem with this community. And like we said it before too, is like not enough people are like well enough versed in this and how and in Marx, what Marx really wrote in Capital, and especially Volume 3. And they kind of touch on in this one, but Michael Roberts is a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, it's because it's complicated, because I mean it's not like, yeah, there's more spending, but now we've gotten to the point, I mean, we're just it makes it doesn't make any sense, but it makes sense to the people who are like, I mean, they're just pushing this old line. But I mean, the amount of debt that is accumulating now too. And I mean, even for Marxists that are concerned about the environment, I mean, even if this helicopter money would start it, we can't ramp up industrialization to the levels that would be needed to around World War II, where we'd have the profits to pay off this fucking spiraling debt. I mean, yeah, it's just not feasible. There's so much that needs to be talked about here too, and there's a big point missing at the end. But do you have some any comments about like what they said through this article?
yeah, I mean, like reading this article, it seems to me that like when I read an article like this, and then the author um writes as if they understand what's really going on, especially with like macroeconomics, it's a huge red flag for me.
Yeah, I
Because
mean, I was like, I didn't like this because I was like, I like Michael Roberts better, but you have to really be following economics for the most part. But like this guy, like takes a bunch of different stuff and puts it together and makes it sound like he knows what he's talking about.
exactly.
And then right at the end, he talks about like he talks about the problem with workers, but the biggest thing he missed is like that he talked about debt the whole way through, but then he didn't relate it back to the workers and stuff about like this is going to be one of the biggest problems is we're going to be faced with paying this for all of this stuff.
Well,
And
there's
now
there's a
it's
big debate between like capitalist economists as well,
yeah.
like
Oh,
how important is the debt,
yeah. Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like and how much debt before it becomes an issue, things
Yeah.
like that, right?
But I
And
mean, as
so
I said from Michael Roberts, like I hope he expands. I said a few months back, I hope he expands on this, the falling rate of profit and stuff. And he's just been building and building and putting more articles out on that. And it is. I mean, the debt is it's it's mathematically showing now that we are in serious problem. And this is what Lenin and Marx wrote about what was going to happen, and that why we needed to make the jump to socialism. But I mean, we'll get into the productive forces thing in the next few articles that Roberts talks about. But yeah, I mean, this one didn't impress me about IMT. Like they do this a lot at IMT about like try and talk about numbers, and some of it's like yeah, yeah, and then they try and put it together in an article that didn't really flow very well, you know.
yeah, I mean, it, yeah, it kind of reads like a bourgeois news article in a lot of ways, like as in it's kind of, in my opinion, it's arrogant.
Yeah, it's
Um,
okay, well, there's
we
these
understand what
put
this
in some
means. No,
terms and
you
stuff,
don't.
but I'm like, yeah, it didn't really lead, you know,
Yeah,
to
like
to
I've read enough
yeah,
of these economic articles over the years to like it's kind of like the more you know, the more you know you don't know kind of thing.
yeah. And I mean, I'll just quickly example before we go on. Then he talks about brings up this idea of countervailing factors, and I mean, Roberts writes a whole series of articles on that, which is important to understand so much of like what Marx's theory of the falling rate of profit, and they don't even go into this really. I mean, this guy's just pulling stuff together that, and this is not going to help, if their audience is the workers, like, I mean, I know what's going on here just because I've read a lot of economics, and so have you on this kind of stuff. But people who are that we're trying to win over, fuck, this would be just fucking bunch of garbage.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, well, they wrote about is inflation back,
Yeah,
and and then they give a couple of quotes. Like, one of the quotes that they provide is from Michael Burry.
Yeah,
and
who predicted it?
Yeah, the guy who predicted the subprime.
Sure.
You know what? If I have $1 for every time I hear this guy predicted the subprime mortgage crisis in 2007, I'd be very rich. Because like, it seems like
fuck. I mean, Marxist has been saying this kind of shit for.
I don't want to hear about this guy or that guy predicted the subprime mortgage crisis in 2007. Like, and
Roberts predicted that.
And he's saying that the hyperinflation in the is in perfect Weimar style is brewing. So basically, Great Depression levels of inflation is on the way. Of what would that be, like 20-30% or something? Like, look, inflation is high compared to 10 years ago when it was like nothing. Yeah. Because like today, it's like the CPI. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I know this because I just looked it up.
Yeah.
Like, because people are arguing about it for the carpenter's contract. And it's 5% in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
So inflation's up 5%. At 5%. It went up 0.6% in the last month alone. It doesn't mean it's going to go up 0.6% every month for the next 12 months. It's just this last month was especially bad. And so it's gone up to 5%, where it was basically like 2%. It was like very little. And so I'm sure you know this, Andrew. If inflation goes up 0.5%, everybody who has money in the stock market is going to freak out.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid that their portfolios are going to be affected by that 0.5% of inflation, because that's a negative catalyst or positive catalyst, depending on where your stocks are at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why we're hearing about inflation everywhere, is because we went from like 2 to 5. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that we're entering a Great Depression with 30% inflation. I'm not saying we're not. I'm just saying that doesn't mean that.
No, yeah, exactly.
That's a big leap. And
there is a big leap, and I mean there's concerns, but I mean,
and their article,
they're trying to bite off more than they can chew.
Yeah, and their article is quoting bourgeois pundits, which I'm not totally against, but I'm against the way they present this, because like it's easy to look at, to turn it on to Fox News and then say, what Fox is saying this, or CNN is saying this, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, maybe Fox is saying this and maybe CNN is saying that. But the thing is, like, a lot of that, there's a whole lot of factors in play, and there's a lot of big money that manipulates the news and basically pushes out what's commonly called, by people that trade stocks, FUD, FUD, or fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yeah.
Because FUD can tank the stock market, which is bad for those who want the stocks to go up, and it's great for those who want to drive the stocks down.
Oh yeah, I've wrote about this before, yeah, and it's like years ago about this kind of thing and algorithms too, the way they
Right.
work, and like that's what happened during the flash crash and stuff.
Yeah.
This kind of information
So
being
like
misread too.
the degree of inflation, I don't think anybody's really sure yet, like what the degree of inflation is going to be.
Yeah.
And like the Republican Party is pushing out, oh yeah, there's going to be massive amounts of inflation, 20-30%, because Joe Biden is having an infrastructure package. Nobody knows that right now.
No, and not that we are Marxists, like saying, oh yeah, spend out your ass and MMT, but yeah, I mean, we just it needs to be more evidence to just jump on that line and say this and this is going to happen, because you're right, yeah, nobody knows for sure
Nobody
yet. I
knows
mean,
the
even
long-term
Marxists
effects
that talk about, about like the crashes and stuff, and they can't really say when, but they say it's coming and this is why, and it's coming soon, and it's going to be periodic, and it's going to be worse and worse and worse. Those kinds of things you can say, but
right.
Nailing down like 30% inflation's coming, I mean, that's just anyways.
Yeah, that's a big leap. And yeah, there's like the lockdown, like they mentioned the lockdowns and stuff, and how that caused some complications in the capitalist system. And I think it did, but the lockdowns are being lifted right now because of vaccinations.
Yeah.
And so now, whether it's premature or not, I mean, I kind of think it's premature myself. I mean, I still wear a mask at the grocery store, even though like it seems like 75% of the people don't wear masks anymore.
Oh, it's still mandatory.
So I'm definitely concerned still. Like, I've been meaning to ask you, Andrew, speaking of COVID, and it's a little off topic, but it's, it would entertain my own curiosity. Is I've heard that the vaccinations have not been rolled out effectively in Canada, and I was wondering if that's true or not.
No. I mean, I was so busy and like tired, but I've got my first one booked, but the second, but I'm behind. I've got mine for Tuesday, but the second rounds are already coming out right now.
Okay.
So there was originally like some cancellation of the vaccines coming into Canada, but I don't know. It's been solved, and now like they're lifting there's different phases of lockdowns, but people are still required to wear masks in stores and stuff like that. But as far as vaccinations go, I mean, I know lots of people that are booked for their second one, but since I didn't get my first one yet, I'm like first in line, so I'm like Monday or whatever. But it was like that too, because there was a bunch of people in southern Alberta crossing the border into First Nations in the U.S. because they were doing vaccinations in Montana or something, but or Montana, Washington, but they stopped that. So I mean, as far as I know, I think things are back on track up here for them. Have you got vaccinated at all?
Yeah, I'm I got my second shot like last month, so I'm definitely got it out of the way.
I mean, I think it was a little bit wonky there too, because I had registered, a couple months ago. I was like, well, why haven't they called me? And then they finally called me. So
yeah, two months ago, I was having trouble getting my vaccination, but what I did is I went to a place and I gave him my phone number and I said if someone doesn't show up, then I want to get the shot. So I got in that way.
Yeah.
So I kind of skipped ahead in the line that way. But yeah, like, I mean, from what I'm seeing in this article is there's like a lot of, there like the some of the FUD has been summarized in the article, and then there's a lot of speculation on what that actually means. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I think that that's not certain. there's so many factors up in the air right now with the economy.
Yeah.
With the global economy, with the U.S. economy, um, and it's very difficult, I think, to pinpoint like whether there's going to be an economic crash or not. At this point, it's very, and I think I think the stock market kind of reflects that. It's incredibly volatile.
Yeah.
Like it's been volatile for the last 2 years.
Sure. But also, the past, as COVID and everything else is shown too, I mean, it doesn't always necessarily reflect the confidence of the market either. I mean, it can work both ways, but I mean, you know that. I mean,
Yeah.
trade stuff. But anyway, so do you want to hop on to these Michael Roberts articles?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, yeah, is they mentioned that the working class needs to find a way to present the bill to the ruling class, and
Yeah,
like I think that's a long ways off. I just say that, and they say that Marxists are going to be able to compete with reformists, and we've been covering the Marxist community for a couple of years now. Like over a year, definitely over a year, and like on the show, and we've been on YouTube for a while now, since January.
Yeah, I think it's been a few months now.
And yeah, and so like the thing is, like in our coverage of the Marxist community, I would say it's weaker than when we started the show.
Yeah, I think in some ways,
in a lot of ways.
I mean, I think there are some positive signs. I mean, like we criticize Illinois, but there's people like that out there.
Yeah,
or
we've
Twitch,
watched,
or what's his name? The Twitch guy, Hassan.
Oh yeah, Hasanabi. Yeah,
Hasanabi. I mean, he's declared himself a Marxist. So
yeah.
I mean, I know Ben's probably fucking rolling over and is fucking screaming his head off right now, but
Probably.
but anyways, that's another story.
Okay, so let's move on. I mean, we're kind of still talking about the economy and stuff. Like, okay, so Left Voice is kind of the other big group, Trotskyist group within the Marxist community. One of the other big Trotskyist groups. There's only a few. There's only like a handful. I mean, like literally a few now. And I would say Left Voice is one, and I think it's put out a very similar article to IMT.
Is this the we're gonna
Bidenomics
do
one?
Bidenomics?
Yeah, and it's very similar in that it's a hodgepodge of different things that are going on in the economy that really only show that there's a desire to understand what's going on, but then there's also a lot of confusion. Right?
Yeah.
And it's under this kind of veil of we know what's going on. And like so basically one thing that both of them seem to have in common is that they both recognize that Biden is looking to spend like a Keynesian like a Keynesian into infrastructure, and two, that there seems to be inflation, but really, like, reading this article, it doesn't seem like Left Voice has much of a firmer grasp on what's going on than IMT does.
No, because I mean, we saw they've as well, as Michael Roberts has pointed out numerous times, and I mean, I mean, people have said that too, and it's been offset many times in the United States of the so-called, scare towards, inflation. And I mean, we're not saying it's not a problem, but I mean, they're not talking about, it's not an easy thing to talk about, and it's something that should be, you know,
Right. And
leading.
one of the things about this article that says is, it says, I mean, it kind of, like mirrors the IMT in that they say that, hey, like, it seems that we're looking at a possible economic meltdown, and they reference Argentina in 2001, and that some other countries' economies may be hit harder than the U.S. And it's like, yeah, probably. Probably there'll be like some crashes, maybe a global crash. But maybe it has to do with the debt. But like, this is all like, that's all like speculation.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
some,
and they're not,
but there is, I mean, I still think like what Michael Roberts is, I mean, he's on solid ground on the profitability factor of industrial capital taking away their ability to I mean, that's why productivity is going down. But I mean, that is also tied into debt too, companies' balance sheets or whatever. But yeah, I mean, so take, where is this one? Do you know who wrote this too? Because it's
the Bidenomics one.
Yeah.
That was written by Esteban Mercantante, who's who I think is from Buenos Aires. So he's this South American mothership of Left Voice, because they're actually a South American organization.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. They're
So,
South American Trotskyists.
Yeah. So this is, like I said, this is like something, that it annoys me too, because just that's why every time, I just rather stick to Michael Roberts with like, I mean, it's important to get across the whole board, but this one is another one. But they bit off more than they can chew, and there's too many big ideas that have not been fleshed out enough that need to be, the cardinal rule of writing: keep it simple, stupid. I mean, and they're throwing in, they're just in over their head.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's there's one thing I've learned is the economy is kind of complicated. It's not like, and to be wary of anybody who basically acts like they understand what's going on.
Well, I mean, that's, I keep saying that is like, I mean, fuck, it took Marx and Engels 20 years to write up to volume 3,
right,
and they weren't even done that after that. And that's probably the best analysis of capital ever. Well, I mean, in my mind, no doubt, because on top of that, we have empirical evidence now, 200 years later, of like what Marx said was going to happen, because it's just logical. But I mean, I can't hammer home this enough. People,
right,
stick to the basics of capital and incorporate. I have said that more people need to be writing about this kind of stuff, but that's why even more than ever we need a community that talks together, that can put out better articles that people can criticize and say, okay, well, this is missing, this is unclear, we should leave this for another article. I mean, this is just adding confusion for most people. That's all I got to say about this article.
Okay, so Michael Roberts has several articles. Let's just talk about them one at a time here.
Yeah. Okay. Which one first?
One, and Michael Roberts is kind of an economist that's building trust throughout the entire Marxist community. So he had a guest piece in Left Voice, and as we both know, he also has guest pieces in Weekly Worker.
Yeah.
And he has his own blog. So I frequently see him getting shared more and more often, actually.
That's good.
And so this article, for example, talks about the rise of the productivity of labor under capitalism, and the decline of productivity of labor in more recent years.
Yeah.
And what's that?
Yeah, sorry, finish off, and then I'll
yeah, like, so the rate of productivity of labor and is important because capitalism had a higher rate of productivity of labor than feudalism.
Yeah.
Which,
and this, yeah, I mean, this is a lot of people don't understand. Like, Marx gave it up to it, and that is one of the most important precursors, the importance of, like, is making the jump to socialism, is being able to raise productivity, in society to a point where we can do that. We can do that. So these are the certain areas that need to be talked about too. And I like how in this article, because I knew this a long time ago about, like, what Keynes said would happen to capitalism. He predicted a lot less
the 3-hour workday
and stuff. Yeah, and I mean, it just shows how brilliant Marx was, is saying that what would happen. I'm like, no fucking way that's going to happen under capitalism, because
I really like the quote.
Factors. What?
I really like his bringing up of the average work week in 1930 and how it was 1,800 hours, and it's the same amount of hours, 1,800 hours a year, and it's about the same amount of hours today in 2021.
Yeah.
Roughly 1,800 hours. It hasn't changed.
Yeah. No, I mean, not even down to like a 30-hour work week, which is totally feasible now if we streamline production and got, prices relative to socially necessary labor time and all of that. But that's another discussion. But this is what I like about why everybody should just not just follow him particularly, but yeah, I mean, he takes sections out, important sections, doesn't bite off more than he can chew, but he explains it in relative and important terms of, like, what's important to Marx and Marxist economists.
Right.
So yeah,
I think
that is good, but
the point here is that capitalism is not expanding productive forces anymore. That's the big point.
Exactly. That's his whole leading up to. That is the precursor. That's the point. It's where that you should be making the jump to socialism, and that's what's not happening. Individual productivity in certain areas have expanded, but not overall productivity for how, like, how we're innovating. Yeah, it is slowing in areas in industrial production, and it's being shifted. The profits are being shifted to the banking sector and more debt. So yeah, I mean, this is what I like, and this is what's adding to his whole argument that he's been building for quite some time. The golden age in the 1950s and 60s, he said, marked the peak development of the productive forces under global capital. And on top of that, he he puts down the data, and I like that. There's always data to back it up, and even more importantly, he talks about, this is why, people should follow him, because he brings up other arguments. Okay, well, this is the counter argument, he says, but then he makes a better argument, and that's what scientific Marxism is about, and that's what Marx did all the way through Capital. So, I mean, that's what I got to say about on this. But yeah, that's important realization about the productive forces are no longer, expanding the way they should be, and we've got into the system of monopolies, and monopolies were inevitable, and now they're operating on path dependency, which pushes them to put out a new fucking iPhone every year instead of actual real innovating factors. But then they end up trying to push out. Yeah, I mean, it's not a good way. It's not. Yeah, it's inhibiting productivity now, and expanding, as he said down below, in speculation of fictitious capital, which you talked about a little while ago, where this is what's happening now with large corporations, is they're switching, they're trying to make up gains, and they're speculating in fictitious capital, or bitcoins and all of that shit now as a safe place to hide,
Well, yeah, he
instead
talks
of
about that later
reinvesting.
in a different article. But like the he has another article called "The 1% Own 45% of the Wealth."
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's any argument there.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe we can just skip this one over. It has some good graphs and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's gotten worse since the Occupy movement 10 years ago, but yeah, I mean, there's no argument from me that yes, this is increasing. I think this is mainly just laid out for more of his lay people audience,
Yeah.
And then,
which is good too. I mean, I'm glad he's making a balance, or maybe he's realizing too, he's getting a bigger audience, and it's important to
I do think
from time
that
to time to go
the
back
wealth
and
gap
recap
is important.
basics. Yeah.
I think it is important. It's like the isolation of the ruling class, in my opinion, is basically kind of a telltale sign that a rebellion is around the corner.
Yeah.
And the and then Roberts also has an article on the law of profitability after capital.
Yeah.
Which basically talks about like falling rate of profits, right? And
yeah, and that's this. Yeah, I'm been a big fan of this, and like in building on this, and I mean, because just to recap for those who haven't listened, this is like the fundamental underpinning of like revolutionary Marxist economics is the same thing. This is like the kind of double-edged sword, is what propels it, is eventually going to spell its doom, is that the way it works is, yeah, I mean, and he's been building this for a long time, and this is what bothered me about the other article about talking about countervailing tendencies, which Marx came up with some few laws that would kind of explain the kind of like slowdowns, but overall, like as Roberts has documented, you can see there is this, decline in overall industrial profit. And I mean, you have to be careful when you're listening to it, because we hear about record profits, but record profits for individual companies and the banking sector, which is different from industrial capital, which is the foundation of the productive forces of our society. Because obviously we need those. Because I mean, if it were the stock market, then everybody could just quit their job and play on the stock market. So it obviously has to be based on something, which ties back to industrial capital, which was the whole problem, which Lenin and Marx talked about, why we would have to do this, because they could never imagine finance capital overtaking industrial capital, which has happened. They said that, he mocked it. Marx mocked the idea of big banks being bailed out, and he mocked that 200 years ago.
Right.
Before, and now it's came true. So that is actually one thing that Marx was wrong about, is that he couldn't see the stupidity of the banks being bailed out. But it's become so big, and the dead capital in the markets that is out there. I mean, it was inevitable, but at the same time, totally stupid.
Yeah, I mean, like Roberts is putting forward a perspective which I think is a Marxist perspective, and that's that capitalism is based on it's based on commodity exchange, but it's also based on profit. And everything is motivated by profits.
And that's what ties into the last article is
right.
Which he keeps saying is that it's not just, it has to be profit for and profit tied into reinvestment, which isn't happening. There's just these companies that are making money off the stock market and
I'm not totally sure what Roberts says, what Roberts calls reinvestment or investment in businesses, because I tend to disagree, actually.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there is a less. It's all. This is going to turn into a long conversation.
Yeah,
I mean,
because
reading over some of his stuff, you can get caught up in what he actually means. I mean, there are certain people that disagree, but I'm also saying is that whether or not that's true, it is happening. Is that there is less reinvestment into the industrial side of capital.
I don't really think so.
You don't think so?
Tesla.
That's one.
Lee.
I'm saying as there is I'm saying that finance capital profits are overtaking industrial profits. And so that is also all tied into also, so what I mean is some of these other companies become more debt leveraged. So that has in turn, spiraling consequences for wages, for cutting, trying to streamline production or cut out all these sort of things that basically, workers relied on before. So I mean, it's not just, it took me a while to wrap my head around on everything that he was saying. I mean, but saying it like that, I don't think that's what a lot of some other Marxist economists have agreed with or disagreed with, saying, well, it doesn't necessarily, but just saying Tesla as one example, that's not an overall consistent. That's not what
I mean. The entire EV industry, technology industry, even is heavily.
But I know, but you just said productivity is falling too, and so that's what
the productivity of labor.
What is tied into what is tied is the productive forces. That's tied into that
but
too.
That doesn't.
There are new companies, but there are also a lot of dead weight companies that are out there not doing anything either. I'm not saying that there isn't still innovation too, but even like Tesla, we all know Tesla. Like
We're
it was
talking about
funny.
investment, right?
Like Tesla, like I mean, who was it? I can't remember who said it. Mike, or yeah, it was Jordan Peterson who said that he's brilliant. He basically invented the electric car himself. I'm like, no, he didn't. I mean, like
Wait,
that
that has
was.
not, Andrew, you're getting off topic here.
I'm not getting off topic. I'm
You
just
are.
saying. I'm saying. I mean, saying it's. I'm saying it's not innovate. You're saying that there is, but I mean that's conflicting with productivity, which is tied into that. I didn't say that there wasn't in reinvestment. I'm saying there is a fall into it relative to what it was before, which is tied into profits. Anyways,
I don't think that Michael Roberts has proven that.
well, I saying that there, from what the data says, it's the best explanation for. He also says that it's constant building argument, and if you look at his new book, which I've started to skim, there is tons of data in there to suggest that. And I think what he says overall, nobody has it 100% right, but he has the best explanation of what is going on and the cyclical crashes and everything else. So I mean, it's pretty close. I'm not going to say right now it's full on, and I said in the past that I would like to
Like
see him developing it more.
Like
and he
Roberts
has.
is saying that capitalists are no longer investing the way they used to be, but Ford announced that they're basically changing their whole line to electric vehicles, and so did GM.
Sure,
The biggest
sure.
auto
I mean,
manufacturers in the world.
I'm not saying that either. Also, but that's path dependency, and that also took a long time for them to make that jump. And obviously, they need to do that because it is
Sure,
the way they
it was
have to
motivated by
adjust. But
profits.
also Marx said that and everything that Robert says too is that a lot of things inhibited those factors for years that we could have been there quicker. With I mean, this is a whole
Right, I'm not arguing about that stuff, but
yeah, no.
but I mean about like about fictitious capital and how basically speculation has taken away from investment. A lot of that speculation is investment.
No, I'm not saying
Like the reason why Tesla trades at $700 a share right now, right, isn't because Tesla is a $700 a share company. I mean, like it doesn't produce enough cars. It
well,
doesn't.
That's exactly what you're proving my point by saying that though.
But it's all investment.
That's what fictitious capital is like. I mean,
it's institution. It's a
and just because you're investing in something doesn't mean it's going to lead to increasing the productive forces.
But that never does. An investment is a long-term bet.
I didn't say it never does either. I'm saying relative to what's going on in the financial vehicles that are used right now is not the way it should be. And I think what Roberts is saying, and he's not saying 100% or whatever, but there's cases to be made on like the wastefulness of actual of investment. Like for example, in Alberta, like perfect example, everybody's like during the Ralph Klein years, he handed out billions of dollars for investment for businesses, and like 99% of them, nothing happened. And because it wasn't funneled into the right kind of investment in building human knowledge and the building blocks for innovation. Instead, it was just poured into all these companies or whatever that didn't do anything. And when the oil crash hit, the economy hadn't expanded enough. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Just because there is money being poured into it doesn't mean that there is going to be a proper investment. And yes, there is empirical evidence to show that there is a lot more waste.
Proper and improper investments. That's all opinion. It's all. The bottom line is what makes capitalists money, right?
Exactly, but I'm saying, but that there is more empirical evidence too about the of sustaining. Well, I'm going to bring up an article on like Michael Roberts, and we could talk about this next week because we're winding down the show. But
Sure.
I will bring up this. I want to find this article next week that kind of gets into more about what I'm talking about and dead capital. I think it's on one of his new books or new section of his newer book or whatever. But yeah. Anyways, I yeah, I mean good good to go over some of his new articles and yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's the one thing I kind of have a difference with Michael Roberts. I think is regarding that, and I just wanted to point that out.
Sure. I mean, I also I'm saying he's not saying it's 100% and stuff, and I'm not saying it is either. But I think when you read in conjunction with some of his other stuff, it starts to make sense. I mean, because when I watch some of his lectures and stuff, I'm like, okay, this is kind of what he means and stuff, and like, and yeah. So taking it out of yeah. So in its lone context, then yeah, I do see your point, but he also has other articles that expands on that and then doesn't necessarily like just pin it down to just that. And that's also what Marx talked about, these countervailing tendencies that react and can. So I mean, it's not an easy thing to. That's why this is also been one of the most controversial theories from Marx too. It is this, and but I'm glad he's building on it. Of course, there's room for criticism. Let's see
Yeah. I mean,
where it continues to go from here.
and just to re-spell it out, like Roberts, and I got it on the screen here. Robert says that basically there's falling profitability, and he's saying that should lead to a fall in business investment. And he earlier used the fictitious capital as in the financial center with speculative trades and that kind of thing as an example toward that. But I don't think that he's proven that. And I'm not saying, just you can say all you want that you don't think it's a good investment or not. I mean, that's an opinion, right? But it seems to me that investments are still quite a bit up there. And there's that's actually been the big criticism of the stock market for the last 2 years.
Well, I agree.
Way
That's
too much
exactly what
speculative
my point
capital
is.
floating
I'm
around.
saying it's like that's the idiocy of this whole last 2 years. It's like it's meaningless. It's the stock. It's showing how ridiculous the investments actually work. And sometimes there are good investments, but sometimes, and you've even said to yourself, I mean, it's not in control of how it's not in control, and it's not how it should actually work. It doesn't make much sense. And there is much, but you
not
even
as
said
it
that there
should
is much
actually
more
work.
evidence.
Is you gotta
There
get out of
is
that
so much
dogma.
more evidence. It's not as risky as like now you're sounding like a capitalist.
This is the way it works, Andrew.
I know
it's
how
not the way
works.
it should work.
I
It's
know
the
how
way
it
it
works.
works.
But you even said like before, like we have more information now than ever to make better decisions about how to make proper investments instead of what's going on right now. So
Wait.
that is my. So I mean, you can say, "Oh well," I agree with you.
I think investments have actually increased.
There is enough evidence to do that.
I think investments have actually gone above and beyond what they were before, to the point of absurdity.
But you haven't proven that either.
But I want to. Here's the thing: Roberts is making an argument based on fundamentals, right?
He's not. I'll bring up some articles that show that go more into detail. So now we're just going back and forth. When you say they should do something, hold this off for next weekend.
Okay.
Okay. Sound good?
Yeah. You're gonna have to provide the article back that up.
I'm gonna. You keep count on it, buddy.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it's my opinion that speculation has gone up, less fundamentals, and that's irritating a lot of people that think that capitalism is based on fundamentals. It's not.
I'm not saying it is or it isn't either. My argument's a little more complex than that. But I will look for some more articles and we can get into this more because this is I like talking about this kind of stuff. Obviously,
Sure.
I've told you this before. Anyways, guys, thanks for joining us. I think it was a good lively show. A little week off was good for everybody and ourselves. And thanks for watching. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and see
Hit the
you next
bell.
week.
Yeah, hit the bell for notifications so you know when we go live. Next week, same time, 12 p.m. Pacific. And you can also reach us on Reddit at the link below. Thank you.